Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So today, our livecast episode is on the relationship escalator and on stepping off of it. So, yeah, feel free to join in, ask questions, and uh, let us know what you think.
All right, so I guess we'll start with a brief description of what the relationship escalator is. It's traditionally something that you would see in monogamous relationships. I'm not really sure how it came about. Um, Probably through patriarchal society because that's how everything bad happened.
Yeah.
Accurate.
Yeah, so the relationship escalator is basically the steps that you would see in a typical relationship, where you first meet somebody, you would, flirt, talk, go out on a date, um, have social interaction in a more casual setting, and, maybe start to make that connection there.
And there's usually like some basic steps to it that are it's talked about it. It's a term that's been around for a while, but it was popularized, I believe, by Amy Garan. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing her name. She actually ended up doing a study and writing a book on it. But she talks about it as you start with making contact, so flirting, social interaction, a casual setting, possibly making out or occasionally sometimes sexual hookups. And then there's the initiation phase, which is like courtship gestures, rituals, emotional investment, sexual contact with like emotional aspects to it, um, claiming and defining, the I love you, the couple dumb phrases, and seeing each other as a we instead of an I.
Labels.
Labels like boyfriend, girlfriend, um, date mate, so exclusivity is usually comes into play at this point. So like you stop dating anyone else, like no playing the field, no, etc. And there's kind of this unspoken expectation that the next steps are, the next steps that there's an expectation of continuing up that escalator.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, there's like establishment, there's creating patterns, regular contact, both when together and apart. Um, there's then it goes to commitment, so like planning the forever, accountability on whereabouts, behavior, life choices. I to give some examples, you have some to give?
Um, as far as commitment.
Yeah, or as like the accountability thing.
Mm. Yeah, I guess this ended up under here. And I guess we can talk about this now. I was thinking, at some point I want to back up a little bit and say something I thought of about hookup culture itself, and uh, like a little commentary on people who are still monogamous who decide to stay within casual relationships instead of moving on, and also don't want to or don't know about polyamory.
Mm.
But for now, we'll stay in this. So there's someone that I know as far as accountability. It's a friend of a partner, but anyway, uh, they have some pretty, what's the word I'm looking for here? Unpleasant experiences with their significant other, and like as far as accountability, like normal accountability, I think is like checking in and having trust, and those are things that are kind of expected.
Mm.
But this is like when there is no trust, it becomes a little toxic, like constant texting while out with friends, and also like an unfair expectation that your partner is going to cheat. That's happened a couple of times. And constantly checking in instead of letting the person just spend time with other people because you can't trust them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I definitely have seen that and experienced that myself from both sides of it, actually, because I was an insecure, controlling person at one time. And there's a very big difference between the, you know, you have to check in with me because I need to know where you are at all times versus, hey, please let me know where you're going just so I know you're safe. Maybe, you know, if you're visiting, if your partner lives far away and you're driving like 2 hours home, please check in with me when you get back just so I know you're home safe.
Yeah.
Versus the, you know, I need you to tell me if you leave the house at all because I want to know your whereabouts at all time.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that comes up a lot in a lot of more traditional style, like especially cisgender heterosexual relationships. There's a lot of, it seems to be
Normalized.
normalized, yeah,
Yeah.
where people will just kind of try and assert control over everything and be jealous over friendships and be jealous over anything or anyone that takes more time, like a pet or a job. Someone, like, a lot of times there's a lot of talk of how he loves his job more than me, or
Yeah.
like those stereotypes are just so unhealthy. And but yeah, so there in the commitment phase there's also like meeting family. um then there's like merging, so shared homes, shared finances, engaged or similar, conclusion, married or cultural equivalent, and legacy, which is like home and kids. But like the interesting part, and the part that really relates to us a lot and why we're doing this episode, I think at least, is how do people step off the escalator? How do you, whether you choose to or not, how do you challenge these things and decide where you fit in them? How do you know your options?
Yeah, and I think you see it more in like polyamorous and relationship anarchist type relationships than you do in monogamy. But you even see it in monogamy. Like I remember one of my ex-girlfriends had her aunt and uncle. They were together when I met her for over 20 years and had decided to never get married. And to me at the time, even though I was poly and didn't really have a strong interest in labels, although I was more okay with them at that time, I just thought it was very strange because I'd never seen a monogamous couple like that where they shared a home, shared finances, had children, but just had completely dispensed with the idea of getting married because they saw it as irrelevant. And it, they didn't even really label their relationship. It just was. Everybody knew how much they cared about each other, but they didn't use labels like, like partner or boyfriend or spouse or anything, fiance or anything like that. And I never got to ask them quite why. That was just something they family accepted as it was. But you do see that in monogamy, although not as often.
Yeah.
I guess this feels like a good place to talk about what I was saying as far as stepping off the escalator. I think the people who are typically monogamous or don't know about polyamory or like have a somewhat of a misunderstanding about it and don't really have any interest in learning more, but also want to focus on their career or focus on something else besides relationships. This is actually really common with millennials, but they stay in hookup culture, and they know that the eventual expectation is to settle down, but like they don't want to do that yet, so they stay within casual relationships. And I was actually listening to an audiobook last night. the Smart Girl's Guide to Polyamory, and she was talking a little bit about hookup culture, and I was thinking about this thing that Dedeker Winston says in the book that she wrote that was a the thing about hookup culture is this is I'm just paraphrasing here. It doesn't actually impact like taking on a machismo attitude toward relationships and being more cavalier and more like men as far as women and feminine people doing that doesn't actually empower you. It just makes you have a more like distanced attitude about relationships themselves because you're still putting the expectation on yourself to eventually fall onto the relationship escalator. And I thought that was a really interesting point because I don't think a lot of people or young people know that there is another option, that they can step off the relationship escalator.
But I do want to, I guess, point out that like it doesn't hookup culture is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I know.
But I do want to be clear on that, like that that it is something that is not necessarily bad. It's just not if your eventual expectation is something else, and you're only staying in that because you're not comfortable
Yeah.
with the expectation that culture is placed on you. That's something different. But I guess I do slightly disagree in that I do think that I don't really see it as something unhealthy unless it's something the person doesn't actually want.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't trying to say that I think that overall casual relationships are bad, but I thought that she made an interesting point that there's a cultural narrative surrounding it, that people don't understand that they can do something else, and they think that the options are I commit or I stay in this. Like that's a
Right.
huge thing.
And I think with that, one of the issues I have with hookup culture, which I definitely I don't mind it as a whole. I kind of like it. But I don't like the part of it where it's assumed that you don't catch feels.
Yeah.
Like
Well, yeah.
that you have to be emotionally distant to be casual.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like you can like I read a post that struck me very hard in a polyamory discussion group years ago, where someone was talking about that the most love she had ever felt, the most powerful emotion of love, was with a one night stand who she never saw again. And she, you know, cherishes her long term committed relationships, but, you know, that it was just as possible for her to feel sweeping, life changing, romantic, loving feelings without the commitment part of those feelings in, you know, during a casual hookup. And that there was no pressure from those feelings to make more of it, but just to experience them in that moment, and you know, regardless of how powerful they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think like as long as hookup culture does away with that part where it's assumed that emotions are bad, which I guess needs to really deal with people managing their own emotions and not placing their expectations on other people because of them, then there wouldn't be a problem with it.
And I think that's the point that she was trying to make with the quote, was that saying that that not catching feels doesn't actually empower you.
Right.
It's just a thing that people think does because you are able to separate yourself from the relationship escalator.
Right.
Because people don't really understand this concept as a whole, I think.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So Laura said was talking about she had a conversation with someone at a bar about being together with someone for 15. The person that she was talking to had been together with this girlfriend for 15 years and was talking about how people like would pick at them and tell them they needed to be married, and just the fact that she understood and was something that definitely helped them feel relief and acceptance. So yeah, I mean the fact that it was just accepted in your family too probably made things, it allowed you to view different perspectives, and it also like probably just gave a sense of safety for them
Yeah.
in a sense, like, because I guess if you know, you just want to be how you're happy, and like everybody is like, oh yeah, yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah. Story of my life.
Exactly.
It's all terrible.
But yeah, you know, like just providing that safe space in the home is such an important thing. So so there are like some different ways that people can step off the escalator. We've mentioned a few of them, and yes, acceptance and understanding is definitely the basis of social change. I definitely agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big mood right there. Yep.
So yeah, we've talked a little bit about stepping up, and we're a polyamorous group, so um, monogamy is one way that leaving behind monogamy is one way that a lot of people step off of the relationship escalator.
Yeah.
And should mention, playing the field and cheating are not necessarily stepping off of the escalator, because there's still something that's common and almost expected, even if like cheating is not condoned in monogamous relationships.
Right.
Mhm.
Why would people worry and be so suspicious if it wasn't something that people
Yeah.
were culturally aware was very common?
Yeah.
So, so, so when we're talking about stepping off with non-monogamy, we're talking specifically about consensual um, non-monogamy. There's also stepping off with merging. Like, I'm solo poly. I never want to merge finances with someone. I very rarely feel even vaguely comfortable with the idea of sharing a house with someone. So, like, the idea of merging life to the point of we, instead of being independent people who spend each other's company together and love each other, and then also have our own selves
Mhm.
and our own finances and our own lives outside of each other, is incredibly important to me. And so that's another way to step off. That's one that
Right.
that is maybe not, like, even in monogamous relationships, sometimes that people can do that, where they'll, you know, they'll live in separate houses, or they won't share all of their finances, and there are ways to do it in varying ways, like separate bedrooms, or living in other states or countries, or
Mhm.
you know, it's
Yeah. That actually is kind of how most of my relationships work. Uh I initially assumed when I started getting into relationships as an adult, and was so glad to be out of the house and able to have adult relationships, that you share a bed with somebody. And spending many lonely teenage nights alone, I was very excited for the prospect of having somebody there, especially because I have siblings, but was also an only child. Odd sort of dynamic there. But you know, I'd been a very lonely kid. And I started sharing bedrooms with partners, and that went on for the first 5 or 6 years of my adult life. And finally, when me and my former fiance split up, my other life partner at some point was like, all right, you know, we share a bed. I don't want to do that every night. And I was like, all right, how does this work? Like, why don't you love me? Um, and you know, he's taught me more in the past 8 years than I've learned in my entire lifetime from anybody else. And you know, I grappled with it and was like, wait, okay, you know, we tried it, didn't share a bed most nights for months. And I was grappling with the emotional, okay, does this mean something's wrong? He says nothing's wrong. I know logically that changes don't always mean that something's wrong, and de-escalations don't mean something's wrong, but is there something wrong? And after a few months of that, I hit on the fact that I'd completely not noticed that I liked it better.
Yeah.
And, you know, since then have been very adamant with future partners that no, I don't share a bed with people because I enjoy being able to sprawl. I like not overheating. I'm very fond of not being yelled at in the morning for smacking my partners in the face because I flail when I sleep. And like I gave a former girlfriend a black eye once. It was a sad time and I felt horrible. So, you know, it's
Aw.
nice. And like, you know, we found other ways of working around it. You know, I share beds with partners on occasion when they visit from out of town because it's a short-term thing. Or he snuggles with me in my bed before we go to sleep and then goes to his own bed.
Mhm.
And it works. And it took just trying something different for me to realize that, like, all those little relationship escalator intricacies, you could really opt in or opt out of any of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another one that another place that people opt out a lot is with hierarchy, specifically with hierarchy of relationships, friendships, and other types of like romantic versus friend relationships or things like that. Like, you know, there's an assumption with the relationship escalator that, okay, so I'm dating this person, I'm married to this person, they are more important to me than anyone else, and they are like, and so we, no matter how long I know them or how long I've known my friends or how close I was to my friends before we started dating, and sometimes like people don't prioritize that.
Yeah.
So
None of the three of us practice hierarchy.
yeah,
Just as a for instance.
I mean, I don't have prescriptive hierarchy. I tend to have descriptive hierarchies in some of my dynamics simply because I have some partners that have greater need for me than others.
Yeah.
And because, you know, I do share finances with one partner because I was the sole supporter of our household for a while.
Mhm.
So we got a bank account that he could have access to because I was supporting him. But again, it was not a this enhances our relationship and puts us at a higher level type of
Yeah.
choice. It was a what's practical.
Yeah, I mean, same. I also have some descriptive hierarchy with Nate, but it's not prescriptive.
Right.
Like we share finances too in a house, but
Right. And
but I also often sleep with other partners at their place or whatever. So
yeah, and I feel like practicality has ruled a lot of my relationship escalator steps. But you know, at the same time, because the choices are made to make life easier and enhance it for the people involved, they don't have to be relationship based choices. They don't have to be all centered on one person or singularly relationship based. They can extend to other partners, but it means they could also extend to friends. And
Yeah.
I've frequently for years had a household that was a mix of friends and partners, and finances were shared, at least in regards to household expenses. And I'm working on an eventual intentional community with an even greater level of financial sharing as we create a community together. And again, it's more, those are very intermeshed steps. Most people wouldn't put, you know, their life savings into that kind of like home living situation venture, like a house or community with people that aren't partners, but I'm more than willing to,
yeah.
because I don't see that as a necessity to confine that just to romantic dynamics.
And I also think that like there's like, even you know, sometimes people do choose to follow the relationship escalator and it kind of does work for them. But I think that like the important part is recognizing where there are options to step off and making conscious decisions. And like Ray is my platonic life partner. Ray is a lot of awesome to me, and and like, and so friendships and like to me every relationship is first a friendship and also first and foremost and also
Mhm.
that connection, that friendship is something that I want to stick around no matter what happens. As long as there's not like deliberate harm. Hi.
I mean, if I deliberately harmed you, it would be smacking you with the bruiser.
I'm
Fair.
That is my largest of dicks.
oh my god. I mean, I'm pretty close to both of these goofs too. And like I feel like I'm definitely as close to some of my friends as I am to my partners. And that's definitely the other thing about hierarchy versus not that.
Right.
Is
Like,
having friends that you're really close to. Which kind of goes back to the point I was talking about earlier with like the person that I know whose significant other is very demanding is like, and she's not the only person I know who's like this. She definitely expects to be first over her partner's friends. So
right.
and that's I can't deal with that myself.
Yeah. And you see that expectation in monogamous relationships to the point that, like, on TV, even there's that trope of like, you get into a relationship and you have to, you lose all your friends, you abandon all your friends.
Yeah.
And it's almost as though stepping on to that escalator kind of de-escalates everything else without thought. Not because it's a necessity, not because there's a reason to, it just does.
And there's definitely points where I'm like all wrapped up in NRE and I get wrapped up in a person and forget to check in with other people. But it's never to the level of like forgetting my friends or forgetting my other partners or whatever. So
yeah. Sarah brought up a really good point. So labels that create hierarchy.
mm-hmm. Like husband and wife, like that sort of thing, or
I mean, okay, so I think that labels can create hierarchy because of the societal implication of those labels.
I think that there's something that have to be discussed and what their meaning is should be discussed instead of because they can mean different things to different people.
Right.
Yeah, and there's like legal hierarchy. Like literally the law favors you because you're married to them.
Right. Person. And I mean, in polydynamics, you often see people going through multiple marriage ceremonies without all of them being a legal marriage, but more of a spiritual marriage. That way they can at least have that specialness with multiple partners.
Yeah.
But even then it creates, as a relationship anarchist, that's very different from my thoughts on doing things, because it still creates this delineation that like romance is better than friendship or is more than friendship.
Yeah.
When in my opinion it can be for some people, but it isn't just because society decides that it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people can think of a best friend that they've had for many years who's one of the closest people in their life, and then compare that with every relationship you've had. Maybe some relationships you've had have been stronger than that, but have all of them? Exactly. The fact that they're romantic doesn't automatically.
And are they still happening? Yeah. The ones that were.
And I've been very straightforward, even when I didn't know about all of this, like with Nate. I was like, listen, I've known Christina since we were children. and my friend Steph is one of my best friends. I'm always going to be super close to them. And it's probable that I will be closer to them at points than I am to you. Like, it's just... Because you've known them forever, some of your friends.
Right. I've definitely expressed that to various partners that, there are people that I am very close to, have been for years, whether in a, quote unquote, just friendship way or a more romantic and sexual way, but the dynamic is shaped like a friendship. And that's primarily what it is. There just might be other components to it. But just because it's somebody who, like, I have not talked to for a year and a half doesn't mean when we get together again, we're not going to be just as close. And also doesn't mean that I won't jump back into their bed, when
Yeah.
I haven't done so for a year and a half. And to expect, if you go through the escalator phase of meeting all my partners,
Yeah.
that does not mean just because you meet my more established in my life dynamics does not mean every person that you might have to expect me to jump into bed with or be incredibly lovey on should they come by, and should you end up meeting them later on. And that's a surprise for some partners, but it's like, no, you could know me, you could be, Kelev and I have been together for 8 years now. And I think there are still a couple of people in my life that I have not talked to in a few years, but would be extremely close to if we happen to hang out again, that he's never met, that, things would be just as close as they were the last time we were together. And he'd have to adjust to that. It would be like, new partner on the scene, but actually, no, they're not. They're from before you. And yeah, get used to it. They're here.
Practicing and diving into relationship anarchy and knowing you guys has really, like, helped me see a lot of that too, and understanding, like, the flow of different relationships and how it is okay to go from being romantic to being friends to being romantic to whatever the fuck you feel like doing. And also, like, I also have friends who I haven't talked to for months at a time, and then I'm just like, they'll message me, I have a crisis, what's going on? And you're like right there for them. So
Yep.
Yeah. So it also, like, not every relationship that is meaningful has to, like, we've talked a little bit about this, but like sex and romantic connection, there can be, like, relationships without romance, relationships without sex that are just as meaningful.
What?
And there could be relationships with sex or romance that are less meaningful. There's just, everything's so much of a spectrum, and those aren't the only things that classify whether something is worthwhile.
The only relationships that are not meaningful are the ones where you don't own a cat. So.
I can't disagree.
Yeah, there's no. It's okay though. Everyone works up to that owning a cat together point.
Yeah.
So, like, maybe that's the one escalator step that you have to take at some point. Children know, but cats, I don't even really like cats that much. I just know that, like, I don't dislike them. My cats are the best thing in the world, but I'm a dog person.
But
anyway.
You own cats, so therefore.
I do, and Kelev and I have mistaken on cats together because sometimes they wander into our house and he likes feeding anything that comes inside. So it's true. It does happen.
I had made a side note to, under the hierarchy and friendship thing, to mention, like, communities that you're in. For me, like, I'm in the Central PA Women's Chorus, and I'm very close to some of those women, and those women are generally very close to each other. And we're close to our director and our pianist as well. But, like, I know some of the people who are in the chorus who are actually married to each other and together in the chorus, and they are, like, just as close with their friends within that community as they are to their spouse, just about. And it's just, like, I feel as though if you're in a community like that, it's maybe you understand that concept more, especially, like, people think of, like, your church community or just, like, a community of people that you've made. Our polyamory group is big for me. Like, just being closer to people can really help you to understand that can be just as, if not more, rewarding than a romantic relationship.
Right. Although it's odd because some people also do have such strict boundaries in their minds that stop them from that probably because they've never questioned it. Like, when you were saying that, I was thinking about my mother and her choir. And she's formed such a bond with people, and that's a huge part of her life. She's been in her choir for, I don't know, since as long as I can remember, so probably at least 20 something years. But I remember recently I had a bit of a disagreement with my parents, which doesn't happen often. They know everything about my life, poly, kink, you name it. But where they were saying how if I got married before finishing school, they would not help financially support me, which they're doing at this time while I'm in school. And I was, very confused as to why. It wasn't about whether I wanted to get married at that point or not. It was about the fact that someone was making an assertion there that I just didn't understand. And so what it boiled down to was this concept that they had that once you are married, you are an adult and you are separate from your parents, but until that point, you're not. And I was just going through in my head and being like, all right, I've gotten 2 degrees already. I've held a job and supported myself without your help whatsoever. I've been in multiple relationships. I've gone through abuse and trauma. I've, dealt with deaths of people I love dearly and animals I love dearly. I have managed to, help people through immense amounts of trauma. And I've done, I also own my own home. I've started my own business. I'm working on starting an intentional community. How is all that not in any way a measure of whether I'm an adult or not, but signing a paper that says I'm married to somebody is?
Yeah.
And, we discussed it angrily at first and then more calmly. And it came down to, them calling a few days later and my mother apologizing and being like, you've told us for years that all these people, all these partners and friends are your family. And, it just didn't click that you already have a family to support you. And, they said, now that we've realized that, we're not going to stop helping, but if you do get legally married, we will, because that's the line in the sand we drew. And it doesn't matter if we realized it doesn't make sense. It's there. So, that is what it is. But in their mind, it was like they were my only family and my only support until you get married and then you're passed off to your spouse and they're your family and support. They had that idea so stuck in their heads that they couldn't get around it, despite the fact that they've, respected all of my partners, accepted all of them, considered them all my partners, take them out to dinner, eat Thanksgiving with all 12 of us every year. It boggled my mind how just, even though it was smacking them in the face over and over like a dead trout that someone was wielding to smack people in the face with, they just couldn't get it. And they finally did, I think, which means they'll probably unget it in a month or 2.
Yeah.
But society just drills that idea in your head. And that, after that long ramble, I apologize, it goes back to me realizing why my mother never probably connected as much with her chorus community as you do with yours. Even though she cares about them, I don't see them being... I see the role that my father plays in her life and the role that they play as very different and a very big separation between roles. And I think it's because she was raised in those societal boxes and never stepped outside of them enough to question or change it, or probably because she never wanted to.
Yeah.
It worked, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. And I think one of the last ways people tend to step outside of relationship escalator are continuity and consistency. So in the escalator, death is the only ending, or de-escalation not labeled a failure, which is pretty rough bar. It's you could be married to someone for 22 years and be best friends after, and it's still a failure. And
Yeah.
so it's a one way, one result staying. And
Failed relationship is what they label it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so if things change and people are still valued, you're suddenly off the escalator. So like the so relationships that are fluid, that change, like you've talked about, really romantic to friendship to, various wibbly wobbly,
Mm-hmm.
madness, is like, I view it as something that's really important, because I think that, there's a reason I date people. It's because I think they're freaking awesome. And
Yeah.
and why
reason.
would I want to like sacrifice that entire connection just because something romantically just didn't fit? There's so many other ways of connecting and relating and valuing people. And leaving that alone and just saying, oh, it's not worth it, just because one form of connection didn't work, is frankly just terrible, and it feels terrible. And there's also the aspect of consistency. So like you talked about partners and friends and people that you connect with, like when they come into your life, you have that wonderful connection. When they go somewhere else, you're fine. And that's another way that people step off of it, like, or comet partners. Like, I know you have partners that are, drop in sometimes, maybe there for the big events, then go back to their life, and you see them when you see them, and they're important. You value them, but they're not the center of your world, and yet they're still just as important when you're around them.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So like, yeah, I think those are the main points. Does anyone like have any questions for us? Anything you want to ask? Any stories you want to share?
I do have a story if nobody asks anything. But I want to wait and see. Anybody have anything to say?
Beep,
No?
bop, boop. Okay.
Okay.
Story time.
All right. So yeah, talking about de-escalation. That's a word that seems to have a negative connotation, whether I want it to or not. But I, again, with Kelev having taught me everything, because he is the wise master, only thing he's ever a master of. He's not a master of wisdom. That is so inaccurate. But he's great at teaching me stuff. Sometimes I'm like, you were put in my life just to show me how wrong I am about everything except for the things we argue about, because then I'm always right. And I learn all this stuff. He blows my mind all the time. So our dynamic has changed so many times since we've gotten together. And I say together, but it is not a titled relationship. But it like we've had strict master slave relationships. We've had more loving but still kinky owner pet relationships. We've had titled like boyfriend relationships. I don't know if we were ever officially engaged at one point or not. We've certainly talked about marriage. And he still says he has every intent for us to get married at some point. Although we both kind of think the institution of it's a little ridiculous, but we like the kind of storybook romance of it, and the fact that then I have legal rights and he's in not good health. So it's important. But otherwise, it's the institution of marriage. So
it's a whole nother podcast, right?
Yeah, that's another one there. But yeah, we've done that. We've lived together. We actually, even though we're closer now than I think we've ever been, over 8 years, and we've always been pretty much joined at the hip, we now don't live together for the first time in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not, again, because there's anything wrong, we've taken the title on and off and on and off the dynamic. I don't even know how many times. And at first, all this was very traumatizing for me. But it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it really forced me to question, what are these things that are changing? How does it change how we actually treat each other? Does it change how we treat each other? And all of the societal baggage, the labels, and the ideas that come with them didn't make us closer when we had them, and when we didn't have them, we typically got closer because I was forced to look at and appreciate what we did have, as something not attached to just a name. I didn't take it for granted. And like even now with not living together, that was a big de-escalation of our dynamic. That was the first big change where it wasn't just a label changing. It was how we actually interact on a daily basis is different. And getting used to that de-escalation and learning to see it as a positive has been a journey in and of itself. But we've gotten closer because of it. We spend a lot more time talking on the phone. We are normally at each other's houses more days of the week than we're not. And we're closer because it's made everything new and shiny again, because there was a big change. And I don't think that could have happened if he hadn't taught me so many other times over the years that a change in relationship dynamics and where you are on that escalator and going backwards or forwards or jumping off it to the side and landing in the little pond in the mall with all the pennies, none of that actually makes your relationship worth less.
Yeah.
It doesn't make your partner worth less. It doesn't make you less in love or close as friends or whatever else you have. It doesn't make the sex worse. Sometimes it makes it better. But none of that has to change just because you add a different piece to the escalator or don't. Not to say that it doesn't often change things for people, but aside from exactly what you choose to alter, it doesn't have to ripple out and affect anything else unless you want it to.
Yeah. And I think that the aspect of respecting someone, like the fact that you respect what Kalev needs in that moment, in the relationship, also brings you closer rather than separating you.
Yes, I think that's actually been a huge component in why we are so close, because I think the first time it happened, I faced a choice where I was like, all right, suddenly the title's gone. I'm scared. I feel insecure. Nobody else will know my claim over this person. Can I live with this? And I was like, he most of the changes happened because his mental health is kind of wonky, as he'll well admit. And sometimes he's just like, oh, brain can't deal with this right now. Why? I don't know. Childhood trauma. Can't deal with it. Let's do things different. And I'm like, okay, nothing I can do about that. And so I faced that choice, and I was like, can I handle this? Can I handle feeling scared and confused and suddenly hurt by changes? And if I can't, what do I do? Well, there's nothing I can do. I can't fix him. He's not broken even, but even if he says he is, I can't make his mental health better. I try, but I can't. So I can either live with the changes and love him for who he is, or he could not be in my life. And since I didn't see the second as an option, I went with the first. And I am the kind of person who feels like if something's going to happen in your life that you have absolutely no control of, instead of trying to control it and making everybody miserable, you just let go completely and try and find exactly what about it you can be happy with.
Yeah.
And that's why not living together, the one thing I thought I'd draw the line at, has been absolutely fantastic, because now we have more NRE and can really appreciate each other more than we have in years, because we don't spend as much time together. and he's mostly gotten over his hatred of talking on the phone, or at least he ignores it for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he probably just ignores it for me, but it's
That makes it even cuter.
yeah. But yeah, the fact that and it's like, think about it. Anybody who's watching this, like, if you live with your partner, how would you react if they just decide to move out? How would that change things? It would probably like
Yeah.
royally fuck things up. But then the question is why? I mean, yeah, you miss them. Yeah, you miss having that presence every day. But was your relationship good before you moved in together? And why can't you go back to that?
Does it mean that everything ends, or does it just mean that
Right.
things change?
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can deal with that kind of fluidity, it gives you the option to have whatever you need at the time.
Mhm.
And because you will have a kind of euphoria from those up escalator moments, because society's taught us to, and we can't completely escape that.
Mhm.
When you have the fluidity to go back and forth, you can go up it multiple times too,
Sure.
Yeah.
which is really nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the special moments just all over again. Yeah.
Yeah, you get a lot of special.
Okay, so do we have anything else, or should we?
I don't know. If nobody has any questions, then
Yeah.
I guess not.
I mean, I guess
Okay.
just question where you are on the escalator, and next relationship you're in, talk about each of those steps and talk about exactly where you want to go.
Oh, that is.
Mhm.
There we go. Someone else said their relationship has improved after not living together. See, I'm not the only one. Thank you. Like, people look at me like a freak when I tell them that, but really, for some people, it makes such a huge difference, and you'd think it would make things absolutely horrible because you've somehow failed. But what's the metric of failure? If things are better, I think that's kind of a metric of success.
Yeah.
And I also think like we got a lot closer when I moved when we started.
Right.
Because
I love you so much, but not until I've woken up. I am not a good person in the morning. And James is the kind of, I would tell him every single day when we lived together, he'd come up to me and be like, hey, how are you? How's your morning going? Do you need any help with anything? Can I have a hug? And I'm like, the worst thing about living with you is how fucking sweet and happy you are.
Aw.
Because I am not a nice person in the morning, and I need people to leave me the fuck
You
alone.
are like that in the morning.
Like,
it is cute.
yeah.
James
The-
is like, stop.
The worst person, yeah, you're a terrible roommate because you're too fucking nice. Like, that's the problem. So yeah, it's things like that where you can definitely be better as a unit with somebody when you have space of different kinds, and
Yeah, the more, even partners that I live with, the more time I spend not around them, the more I appreciate them when we're near each other.
Right.
So,
yeah, it definitely, people don't realize how much you need your own space. I don't know whether people of previous generations really pushed down their emotions, or whether the way they grew up, the society they grew up in, they're just better at being around somebody all the time, or maybe they're so invested in their careers that they have those other things.
yeah.
But like, I don't understand. I don't know if it's our generation that, well, Caleb's not our generation though, so I guess it isn't just our generation that's different. But like, people need their own space. People need their own autonomy. People need that balance, I think, for a healthy life between love and partnership, whether it's romantic or otherwise, where it's you and another person working together for something,
Yeah.
for something that you share. and you need community, that people working together in larger groups, and you need independence of
Yeah.
you
Working
fostering
for your
your
own
own
things. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think, I mean, to some extent, that is a thing that a lot of older generations think about too, because like there's the stereotype of the midlife crisis where someone
Yeah.
hasn't taken the time for themselves,
Mhm.
and then they're like, oh shit, I just feel so lost. I need to take this time for myself. So it's like they bottle it all up until they can't anymore.
because they put so many of those relationship escalator, monogamy, marriage expectations. They put those first.
And then they can't
And then
anymore.
and I've definitely done that
Right.
in other in relationships.
Whereas at the same time, our generation is at the point where we're like, yo, we're too poor to get married and have
Yeah.
babies. So like,
And I feel very similar to you. Like I feel like goals as like a community or a group of people that I love, and then my own goals, personal goals, are more important to me than relationship goals, so to speak.
right. I mean, I have some very intertwined relationships, and I have many that are not very intertwined. But I think while there is a bit of a descriptive hierarchy in some of my dynamics, because some people you know, and not even, I mean, I don't know, I'm closer to some people that I wouldn't even label partners than I am to some of my partners, and I'm closer to some of my partners than to some of my family, or some of my family than some of my partners, and so on. That
Yeah.
with me, don't trust the labels. They are in no way a good way to understand my relationships.
Yeah.
The unlabeled one is somebody I'm like basically like, you know, conjoined twins with, whereas I have some labeled ones with people that I love dearly, but like have never even met in person
Yeah.
after 2 years. You know, so like
Yeah.
the labels are not going to give you a good idea of what's going on.
Mhm.
I don't know why they're there. Other people like them.
I
think
I've
they're
pretty much stopped using them. Yeah.
I think they're kind of shiny and sparkly, so I don't mind slapping them on there if someone else wants them, because it's like a bumper sticker, you know. But like, to me, they're not useful in describing to other people what my dynamics are. And I
Yeah.
was going somewhere with the earlier train of thought, and it just went away. It's gone now.
It's okay. We were trying to ask people where they were on the relationship escalator, but nobody really chimed in with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I guess just people, you know, remember that you don't need to do you don't have to do the escalator. You can just hop from one step to another. You can float like a fairy from one step to another, like me and Kelev do, because we're both really, really gay. You can, you know, just like go up, go down, run up the down escalator and kill your legs. Like, don't let society box you in. Fuck society.
And
Fuck
I think like, okay, that's it.
just at a time.
I think like, you know, the important part is just if you choose to do whatever choice you make it consciously with the
Yeah.
realization that it's a choice.
That.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna close it out then. Yeah, thanks for watching, you guys, and we love you all.
Have a good night.
Bye.